Did you know that in the mid-90s, due to the immense success of the Ninja Turtles cartoon, plans were put into motion to adapt the other successful Mirage Comics property, Usagi Yojimbo? And today, I'm gonna tell you all about it. Greetings fanboys and fangirls, I'm ERod and I'm the Blockbuster Buster, and welcome to Legends of Fandom, where I discuss fanboy films and shows that almost happened. This year, the Legendary Rabbit Ronin returned to the small screen in an epic 3-part crossover with Nickelodeon's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I cannot think of a better time to talk about how he almost had his own animated series. But first, let me tell you about one of the greatest independent comic book series of all time, Usagi Yojimbo. Created by Stan Sakai, Usagi Yojimbo followed the adventures of a masterless samurai called Miyamoto Usagi, who just so happens to be an anthropomorphic rabbit, who resides in an alternate dimension that may resemble medieval Japan, but is populated by all manner of anthropomorphic animals, a place where magic and legend are common play. While Usagi Yojimbo may primarily be a fantasy series, the comic is famous for accurately portraying Japanese culture and history, making this one of the most culturally significant comics of all time. Early into Usagi's creation, Stan Sakai entered into a partnership with Mirage Comics, the independent comic book publishing company founded by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, the creators of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Through their 30-year partnership, not only has Mirage published most of the Usagi Yojimbo comics, but Usagi has shared multiple crossovers with the Turtles throughout the years. In the comics, the 1987 cartoon, the 2003 reboot, as well as the modern series on Nickelodeon, in which Usagi for the first time ever was played by a Japanese actor, Yuki Matsuzaki. And am I the only one that thinks that it's insane that it took 30 years for a Japanese actor to play Usagi? Out of the desire to write sci-fi stories, in the early 90s, Stan Sakai created a spin-off series called Space Usagi, in which one of Usagi's great descendants continues following the way of the samurai in the far, far future. Wait a minute. A medieval Japanese samurai having adventures in the far future? This is appealing to me for some reason. While Space Usagi might not have had the mass appeal that its parent series had, it did get the attention of 1987 Ninja Turtles cartoon producer Fred Wolf, who felt the property would make a great animated series, and thus plans were put into motion to adapt Stan Sakai's sci-fi spin-off into its own series. Now, there is a common misconception that the Space Usagi action figure that was released with the Playmates Ninja Turtles action figure series was actually a failed attempt at trying to promote the series. That would be false, as the figure came out in 1991, around the time that the Space Usagi comic was being published. Also, the toy doesn't resemble his comic book counterpart at all. So I'm sure that the toy company just heard that Mirage was publishing a comic book called Space Usagi and just decided to produce an action figure solely based on that name alone, without consulting Mirage or Stan Sakai before creating it. And also, actual production of the animated series didn't start until 1994. So again, to be clear, even though the toy might share the same name as the comic book and the unmade cartoon, it has absolutely no relation to either of them. So, because Stan Sakai is the sole owner of the rights to Usagi, if the show would have been picked up, he most definitely would have been a part of the production, and could have potentially worked on the show as a producer, writer, or even showrunner. Which makes me feel kinda sad, because if this show had moved forward, Stan Sakai would have ensured that the cartoon would have been as accurate to the comic as possible. Not to mention that this would have been the first creator-owned franchise handled by Turner Entertainment, who was very much interested in airing the series on one of their networks. So, in order to develop further interest in the series, Fred Wolf produced a 3-minute animated sample to demonstrate what the show would have been like. The sample featured the talents of a lot of the same animators that worked on the Ninja Turtles cartoon, as well as the voice talent of my all-time favorite voice actor Jim Cummings, who was Leatherhead and the second voice of the Shredder on the original Ninja Turtles cartoon. In the animated sample, he voiced both Usagi as well as his comic relief sidekick, Rogan. Now, the animated sample is available on YouTube right now, and you guys can check it out at any time. But if you want a quick rundown, here it goes. In the sample, we find Space Usagi and Rogan protecting the Shirahoshi clan, when suddenly the Empire attacks under the command of General Nero, as he leads an army of robot samurai, or samuroids.
And the samuroids.
Yup, there's nothing worse than a bad case of samuroids. Those are the jokes, folks. Only to have his forces defeated by Usagi, who is armed only with a sword. Wait, aren't each and every one of your samuroids armed with deadly lasers? Why didn't one of them just shoot Usagi? What the? He missed! Twice! Were the samuroids programmed by stormtroopers? After watching his robots get their metal asses handed to them by Usagi and his friends, Nero politely declares Usagi the winner and leaves. Wow. That was an incredibly nice gesture from the guy who just tried to murder you and your friends. And so the sample ends, as Usagi is declared the new protector of the Shirahoshi clan. And that's it. Now, if you want my opinion of this animated sample, I thought it was okay, just okay. While they did a good job of establishing the characters, the tone, and the overall look of the series, the ending was terribly anticlimactic, and the plot was just a little too ambiguous for my taste, as they never actually explain why the Empire wants to attack the clan, outside of the fact that they are apparently evil, except for Nero, who believes in fair play. But in the end, my opinion is inconsequential, as Turner Entertainment liked the sample, and they were ready to move forward with the show. So this show was slated to have one of the greatest comic book creators of all time writing it, one of the greatest voice actors of all time playing the main two characters, one of the most successful animation producers of the 90s producing it, and one of the biggest media empires of all time airing the series on at least 2 of their networks. So why wasn't this show made? The answer is so crazy it might cause you to go cross-eyed. They couldn't find a company to license the toys. Confused? I'll explain. Unlike live-action shows, most animated shows are solely dependent on merchandise sales to stay on the air. And in most cases, toy sales are far more important than ratings. For example, the first 5 episodes of Ninja Turtles were produced independently by Playmates, the company that makes the Ninja Turtles toys. But the cartoon became a huge hit and ran for 10 seasons. But in its inception, the original Ninja Turtles cartoon was intended to be nothing more than an elaborate commercial for the toys. And I know that sounds ludicrous, but that is the nature of the beast when it comes to children's animation. If you want to stay on the air, you have to sell them toys. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles
from Playmate.
Now at this point, you're probably thinking, ERod, Space Usagi was about talking animal samurai in space! Plus, the property came from the same comic book company that produced the biggest merchandising juggernaut of the 90s. The inevitable crossover between the 2 shows would have made all parties involved millions. So why were the toy companies stupid enough to pass up the chance to license toys for such a lucrative franchise? I can answer that very long and elaborate question with 2 words. Bucky O'Hare. In the early 90s, Hasbro and Sunbow Entertainment produced an animated series and toy line based on Larry Hama and Michael Golden's comic book series about an anthropomorphic rabbit space hero involved in an intergalactic war against anthropomorphic toads. The series was such a massive flop that not only was it cancelled after 13 episodes, but it pretty much soured all toy companies from ever producing another toy line based on a cartoon about a rabbit in space. And thus, Space Usagi, the animated series, was cancelled. Still, the question remains, was this a show that I would have liked to have seen? Well, no. Now, don't misunderstand me. I love the comic, and I'm sure that Stan Sakai would have produced a show that was worth seeing. But to be perfectly honest, I would trade a Space Usagi cartoon in a heartbeat for a proper Usagi Yojimbo animated series. In fact, I'm hoping against hope that the current Usagi Ninja Turtles crossover can possibly work as a backdoor pilot for a possible Nickelodeon Usagi Yojimbo series. Man, that would be awesome. For now, all I can say for sure is that the comic books are great, and I highly encourage each and every one of you to seek them out and read them. And who knows, maybe one day an animation studio will actually have the foresight to produce the definitive Usagi Yojimbo adaptation. Here's to hoping. So that was the untold story of Space Usagi, the animated series. Do you know of any other unmade oddities? Feel free to let me know at ERod@inbox.com so I can determine whether they are worthy of being a legend of fandom. Thank you for watching. Until next time, I'm ERod, and I'm the Blockbuster Buster.
Another dimension, another time and space. A parallel universe is falling on its face. When out of the chaos, who else could it be but the animal adventurers from SPACE? Bucky, Captain Bucky O'Hare, mutants and aliens and toads beware.